Welcome to the Thresholds of Reality, the podcast where we explore unexplained and mysterious events, phenomena, and legends. Today we are joined by author, lecturer, and demonologist Nathaniel Gillis. Strap in as we explore the edges of the unknown. Nathaniel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be with you guys.
Right off the bat, how does one decide that they're going to become a demonologist?
It's merely a working title. We've yet to even define what a demon is, right? So basically, I really can't tell you. Everybody has their own origin story. Mine came from an encounter I had with a malevolent entity in a house that I was growing up in. And it was instrumental in my development and in my pursuit to understand what we're dealing with and what this phenomenon represents to us as a species. And after growing up in a haunted house, I wanted to know more about it. Why did it pick me, right? And why was I waking up in the middle of the night, seeing shadow figures and hearing full-blown conversations going on above my head? And it inspired a curiosity in me, again, to want to understand more about it. And so that's what led me to get into some of the more darker aspects and some of the more darker arts of what we're studying. And that's why I'm here.
Well, did you find out what was haunting your house?
This is going to be controversial. I think that it was either someone who had committed suicide or it was a spirit that makes people commit suicide. I say that because when I was going through that, I was drenched in depression. And I would go into nightmares, a looping nightmare, night after night, every night. I'd go into a deep sleep, and it was a black and white nightmare, and it consisted of someone putting a black 357 in their mouth, pulling the trigger, and then I would snap awake, and a presence would be in the room with me. And so I again, because of the nature of what I felt in that room, and because of the nightmare that was recurring, something to do with suicide, I imagine.
Yeah. That is pretty dark stuff. Did you ever do any research on kind of the history of the building to figure out if there was anything like that going on?
I tried to. I couldn't find anything. I could tell you this, though, guys. I went to, this has been probably 5 years ago now, but I went back to that house and talked to a few of my neighbor friends there, and they said that the owner of that house has been renting it out, and he cannot find a tenant for longer than 4 months. They're just turning over and over. So that's really the only evidence I have. But it was definitely malevolent. You know what I mean? I would stay up the entire night because I was afraid to go to sleep. And then as a kid, at like 8 or 9 years old, I would go to school and I would just crash at school. You know what I mean? Just falling asleep and banging my head on the table. You know what I mean? It was a wild time. And I think that because of what I went through, and you can talk to other demonologists, perhaps they'll share my opinion, but it builds an immunity within us to where when we go in and do more malevolent case studies and cleansings, it's almost like we have a second skin or almost like a shield around us, right? So I guess that's my origin story, and I wish I knew more about it, about what that house represented, but I don't.
The question that you brought up was, well, what is a demon? Mm-hmm. And I think that is also a really good question. And it's probably one that, if you look at religious texts or you're a strong believer in religious history, you would probably not even think twice about that question. Well, we all know what demons are.
Right.
But if you don't have that kind of touchstone, or even if there's maybe a cultural difference between Christianity versus Judaism or Islam or any of the world religions, they might call different things demons. You might have something in Shinto, for example, that would be considered kind of a natural spirit that is being called a demon or something like that. So is it difficult to define what a demon is? And if it is or isn't, what do you define it as?
Well, contrary to Catholicism and even modern Christianity, your Eastern tradition, your most ancient Eastern tradition, tells us that the idea of a demon was a mutated ghost, disincarnate consciousness that was disembodied. It originated from the curse of Cain in the Bible, when God cursed Cain to wonder. You will not find rest. You will be forced to wonder. And so the most ancient idea of what a demon was, again, it's a mutated ghost that's disembodied. And so what it would do is it will possess a body because it needs one. And so that was one idea. In the 16th century, Catholicism kind of codified a new hypothesis, and that is that these are fallen angels, which is a paradox linguistically, even in Jewish thought, which it originated. It's weird, because what's fallen about an angel? And what about an angel is fallen? But what our ancestors were trying to do is they were trying to articulate consciousness, trying to encapsulate what they were witnessing and encountering within homes, within synagogues, within temples. And but if we want to go deeper, the real idea of a demon is something that, again, we don't even have a vocabulary for. You know, if we go to Catholicism, which seems to be dominating my field right now, they're going to tell us that all demons are liars and there's an hierarchy. I heard one priest the other day that said that there's a demon called Inky. It's very interesting, because Inky is not even in the biblical texts. That's a completely separate tradition. So the idea is, okay, where are these demons coming from, and why are they mostly Catholic? I mean, let's just be real here, guys, right? So again, we see that they codified their own creed in the 16th century. And while they were doing that, across the pond in Safdi, Israel, there was a guy named Isaac Luria, who was also kind of codifying his own demonology. And he was suggesting that there are not just fallen angels, but there are actually unclean spirits, tumarua, where these are formerly human beings. And so what I've tried to do within my own research is sift through just the propaganda, what we've been told they are, and actually look at the bloody footprints in the snow. What are their behavioral patterns? What's their pathology, right? What's their victimology? And once you get down to the literature, it's far more complicated than just throwing holy water at a demoniac. And so,
like they do in the shows.
yeah, it's so easy, right? It's not that, again, we're dealing with a preternatural entity who has supernatural knowledge, foreknowledge of when people will die, how they'll die, and it's vastly more complicated and interconnected with the entire phenomenon than what's currently being represented in the field. Again, holy water doesn't fix a lot of things. Crucifixes are being pulled off by these beings. So there are rules that we were told they follow and that they have to follow that they're eclipsing, which leads us to the larger question: are they really demons, right? Are we being lied to by a certain phenomenon that has masked itself as horns and hoofs throughout history, baiting us into believe that they're one thing? Meanwhile, there's something else lurking in the shadows that's completely alien to us.
And so I would go back to that other question, which is, do you have a working theory,
Mm-hmm.
or is this still a work in progress where you're still trying to uncover what's true and what's false? And maybe it doesn't even matter what's true or what's false as far as defining them.
Well, history gave us descriptions. And so, like with the missing fetus syndrome and the UFO phenomenon, right? Ancient texts would call that experience of a woman being miraculously impregnated and then the fetus being taken. They would call that Lamashtu. And they called this demon Lamashtu. It's fascinating. It's a description of the event, not just an entity, but an actual event that occurred to these women throughout history. And so what Lamashtu would do is she would descend down upon the woman at nighttime, stare into her eyes, hello UFO abduction, and then take the fetus from her womb. This was not a miscarriage. This was the fetus is gone, right? And so what our ancestors tried to do is encapsulate with that within a demonological term. That's Lamashtu. What they were really trying to articulate was the missing fetus syndrome and the modern UFO abduction phenomenon, right? But that was their best way to put faces to the phenomenon itself. I hope this is making sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I guess I'm driving at is there anything to the horns and hooves, like you mentioned, or are we looking at something else?
Or is it a scare tactic?
Is there
Propaganda,
Yeah.
right?
masks, roles. Something that's fascinating. I'll tell you something. This is. If you really want to know how deep a person's research is, you'll see how they describe entities. Ed Warren described a demon that had horns. Well, technically speaking, demons didn't have horns, literally. The horns was basically a crown of divinity to show that they were semi-divine. They never had real horns. It was like a crown to them. They wore them as a headdress. But when people say, okay, I saw a demon with horns, right? Why? Again, the phenomenon will play roles. We in my own case studies and others that I've read and other researchers that I'm working with. I mean, the phenomenon can be dear Aunt Edna. Uh, I'm just going to keep around, dude. By the way, I had a show last night, so I'm already in the game mode, dude. I got my game face on, so just bear with me if I ramble too much. But Ted Rice was a medium that was working with Dr. Carla Turner, and for 26 plus years, he thought that his guide was his late mother. For 26 plus years, this guide had been guiding him through his life, giving him prophecies, giving him words of knowledge and insight. And then one day it asked him to do something that was against his mother's religious creed. And then he realized that that entity was not his mother, that that entity was playing the role of his mother for 26 years. So, whatever we're dealing with, there is a profound amount of deliberate deception. And what I've been trying to do is kind of rock the boat in the field because I'm sorry, there's no messianic message here, right? There's no messianic message. And if anything, they're deliberately deceiving us because, and here's something that's, I'm going to highlight this for everybody listening. They're playing by different rules because they're playing a different game. And what we're trying to understand in the field is what game are they playing? What rules do they play by? Right?
Right.
What's their victimology and what's their pathology?
The the first question that comes to mind when you say that is when we're talking about pathology, it sounds like whenever I watch a horror movie,
Mhm.
there's always this kind of parallel between the monster, the supernatural monster, a supernatural being, and an
Mhm.
actual aspect of humanity that is itself monstrous.
100%.
And
100%.
and there's no history of monsters that is worse than the behaviors of humanity towards its own kin, right?
Correct.
So demons are, is it possible that demons are just humans or human consciousness that has engaged in demonic behavior and for some reason cannot let it go?
Absolutely. And what we're seeing right now are inherited behavioral patterns where they have their own beliefs, they have their own language preferences, and it's not just Latin. Okay. This is the issue with modern demonology. And I'm talking about, okay, we have people that write books about names of demons. Okay, that's great. I believe we should do that, but we have to go deeper here for a moment, right? When we're looking for pathologies, we're looking at entities that have their own language preference, their own belief systems, their own memories. And this is what separates us in the 16th century. While Catholicism, again, they were codifying their own religious creed, arguing over whether or not Satan was an actual entity or if he was just a figment of our literary imagination. In the 16th century in the Levant, Isaac Luria was casting out demons that had lived and died and were solving their own murders. So, right, so there's an issue here within the field uh, because we have to understand their pathologies. And so if we get back into the rules that they're playing, the 17th century, there was a woman in Israel who she was a virgin, never been with a man. She gets married. And after the consummation that night, the next day, she's assaulted by an entity. All right. An incubi entity or an entity that appears to a woman in the image of a male, a man. And after it accosts her physically, wink, wink, it possesses her body and begins to regurgitate words from her mouth. And so when we talk about possession cases, her mouth is not moving, but something with an air-like quality had lodged itself in her vocal cavity, and it was speaking through her. And when the Kabbalistic exorcist began to talk to the entity, it said, first question was, why would you choose to assault her now? We'll see that in movies, right? Why would you, right? What's your pathology is what he's asking. Why are you doing this now? He said, because we are forbidden to touch her until she has had intercourse. Now that she has, we are permitted. So there are rules that they're following, and they also have memory preference too. They stalk their own crime scenes. In the 17th century, in Prague, there was, I can keep going, by the way, and in Prague, there was a young man who was with his father picking apples in an orchard. His father goes, okay, son. He goes, I'm going to walk away and go pick some apples over here. I'll meet up with you in 2 hours for lunch. Okay, so when he comes back to his son later on, his son is absolutely diabolically possessed. He's got bruises on his body. He's speaking a different language. And the father is freaking out. He drags his son over to the temple or the tabernacle or the synagogue. Where, here's what we have, what's going on. And so they begin to interrogate that enemy. They said, why would you pick this young man? And he said, because it was under that exact apple tree that I committed my first assault in life.
So he just picked the wrong tree.
He picked the wrong tree at the wrong place at the wrong time. And so, but what we're looking for, though, again, is what rules are they following? And why is it that in most cases they seem a lot more human, you know what I mean, than many researchers would like to admit?
So there's no, based on that, it didn't matter who was going to show up to that tree. It was going to be, so it doesn't, these possessions and stuff, they don't, it doesn't matter about how religious you are, what your beliefs are. It's just, they just decide you're it.
You're there. Yeah. And so they're playing by their own rules here. Okay. And I mean, my God, In Eros and Evil, Ariel Master's my favorite book ever. He talks about entire convents in Catholicism, convents being possessed. So what they're doing, though, is they're overriding any set of rules that we were convinced they follow. And this gets back into the CE5 movement. I did a lecture on Leap Project not too long ago about who's conjuring who, right? Well, you guys are familiar, obviously, with CE5, correct?
No.
Okay. So right now in ufology, there's a group of people who are wanting to be practitioners to where they can summon aliens and summon UFOs. And again, the danger with that is the fact that we're assuming that when they manifest, they're going to play by our rules.
Right.
Now, they're not even playing by the rules they told us they follow, guys. Why would we think they would follow our rules? And so I hate to ramble, but we're still looking, trying to understand more about who they are, how they operate. But there is an incredible amount of disembodiment present. And the theory that I'm working on right now, it's a working hypothesis, but I think it's valid, is that the reason they're implanting fetuses in wombs and taking it is because they're placing their own consciousness in it. What you're dealing with are soulless bodies and bodiless souls. And so the entire narrative of ufology and demonology, they're both the same phenomenon. But what we've done is, in order to put faces on it, we've compartmentalized the two. That's the whole other show, isn't it?
You said we've over time we have figured out rules. Do you think these rules were told as a means of deception?
100%.
And okay, let's think this so that they think they're going to stay in this sandbox.
That bubble. Yep.
To do or not to do, and we're still just going to run amok and do whatever we want to do.
100%. And Dr. Barry Fitzgerald talks about this, where let's get back into the grimoires. Okay, draw a circle, right? Draw a circle and conjure me, and I'll stay within the circle. Well, we know that's not true. They've come outside of the circle, so they're not even following their own rules. So then we have to think deeper as intellectuals and say, okay, why even give us this propaganda? Again, it's deliberate deception in such a way that if we keep believing their horns and hooves, we'll keep thinking, okay, well, yeah, they're all Catholic demons. They all believe in Mother Mary. Meanwhile, what's really going on behind the scenes, we're oblivious to. And I think that's where we are.
So I mean, even that, like the things of like salt and those kind of methods. I mean, that goes to show that even that kind of stuff that people think works actually isn't going to work.
99% of the time, it doesn't. Matter of fact, and that's just true. One thing that I have been recommending that I found in the Mesopotamian text, it was a ritual against Lamashtu, the missing fetus syndrome, was iron. They would literally create second faces, a necklace of a face, it made out of iron, and place it around their necks. So here's why this is chilling when you think about the implications, because what was happening is in the middle of the night, these beings were descending down into the room and staring into their faces. And so their philosophy was, you know what, our last resort here, right, is hoping that they'll stare into the wrong face and that I'll wake up tomorrow with my baby still in my womb. Now, that's how they interpreted that phenomenon as far back as the Mesopotamian texts. Now in modernity, we have the missing fetus syndrome. Same phenomenon, but a different type. And the scary thing is they're allowing us to segregate both fields of research. And I think it's intentional. Because if we can have incubi victims sitting down at the same table as abductees and having the same conversations, they did the same thing to me, right? That's when we start looking beyond the veil and start realizing that we've been hoodwinked into believing these are all separate phenomena. Really, it's one actor, one agency that's wearing masks in order to deceive us as a species.
So there's a lot of, biblical encounters with demons, things like that. The question I would have is, are any of these methods actually effective? It's ironic that you come on at this time because you've got movies like The Pope's Exorcist that just came out, and
you guys watch it?
I haven't.
You know what I'm doing, right? Oh my God, I probably look like an idiot. Gabriel Amorth would always do that in his exorcisms. So, anyways, I'm listening.
Yes. and so I would go, well, okay, how much of this is actually real or really effective?
Right.
Does that do anything? What's really happening? Are there methods that can be effective? If splashing holy water isn't doing it, what can be done?
I think that's where we're at in the field, is the fact that we need to know what they have fear of, because then we'll know what they have faith in. And that's a very problematic issue we have. I mean, if you look at Father Sinistro of Aminos, a Franciscan priest, he was on a dirt road, and a demon walked out from the woods onto the dirt road, looks at Father Sinistro, starts talking to him, conversing with him. It's something completely different, something completely alien. I use that term specifically and intentionally, something alien to this exorcism. And so he began to use his potions, holy water, crucifix, all of the above. And it did not work. And finally, he asked the entity, why isn't this working? And the entity calmly suggested, I don't believe in it. Now, this is a problem that the phenomenon is pushing us all into. I've had cases of women where the marriages have fallen apart because the woman is being, I don't want to get you guys demonetized, but physically attacked in the middle of the night. And the husband doesn't believe it, right? And then I had one case where the husband actually challenged it. Once he believed it was occurring, it was crawling up in bed with them at nighttime in the middle of them. It was crazy stuff happened. But he challenged it, and as he was asleep, according to his testimony, something balled its fist up, punched him in the face. He woke up the next day with half his face suffered from Bell's palsy.
Oh, wow.
So there is a movement. Again, I cannot italicize this enough. There's a movement within the field that is being inspired by the phenomenon to intentionally deceive us, right? It's just like Father Sinistrari said. He was dealing with case studies. Let's go down this area. Oh my God. You guys, chilling stuff. But we've got to talk about it. Father Sinistrari was going into homes within an hour of these beings being there. And he was collecting biological excretions that looked to have been made by corpses.
Wow.
I've said that on the show.
So, what you mean by that is like after like decomposition and there, and like it starts to goo.
It was dark colored. Yes, it was dark green and black. And so this gets back to, again, if we look at all of folklore as one body of work, right? One phenomenon that is operating with different arms throughout history, masking itself here, but doing the same thing. You'll see what Montague Summers suggested, the vampirologist, Montague Summers and Father Sinistrari, was that there were beings that were milking the carcasses of the recently deceased. Now, again, these beings were witnessed hovering over graveyards, taking excretions from the dead. I know this is getting dark really quick, but we got to talk about it. Are we good? I don't want to. All right.
There's no off limits.
So they were taking the excretions of the dead, which we're just now starting to realize how to do. Israel's doing it, and then taking that seed, and implanting it in a living woman. And so we've got to start thinking about this when we're dealing with the missing fetus syndrome in these hybrid mothers who are going out there at conferences and high-fiving each other, not realizing that they're being used as a mortal portal. These are not our children. We don't even know whose seed, right, that's being implanted in them, or even if it's from a living man. And so what the phenomenon was doing throughout history was it was using necromantic rituals and necrophilia to create a hybrid race. And I won't go into that. But yeah, so Sinistrari encountered this phenomenon, and it boggled his mind. And I've had cases like this myself, because when you're dealing with women who've been assaulted by these beings, they don't even know how to characterize them. You know what I mean? It's not a beast. It's not a man. It's not a ghost. What is it? And so the phenomenon is even pushing us to the point where we don't even know how to qualify that as a sin, because, right? It's something completely other than. But I'll shut up.
Well, we have you on here to talk, so feel free.
Man, I'm in one of those moods, dude. Like I said, I stayed up all night researching. I went to bed at 5:30, and just going over and over again some of these texts. But the implication for us as a species is that we are being farmed. There's something out there that wants to be present with, but absent from us. It wants to be close enough to be heard, but far away enough not to be understood. And so, again, we're groping in the darkness here.
Sounds a lot like Bigfoot.
Yep.
So I get it. So I've told this story on the podcast before. We've had people, but the house that I grew up in, there was something in our bathroom. Mm-hmm. So as soon as you'd get in to take a shower, razors would fly off and hit you, toothpaste, and you would come out, and I would come out, and there would just be these 3 scratches covering different parts of my body. And it was like that, and it didn't matter who went in. It would kind of happen to everybody. I never heard anything, no one ever said anything, but like it was an everyday thing. It was just the way it was. And I didn't know if it was just a mischievous spirit, or was it closer to something that was a little more evil, just because it was like you'd be there and a razor would, how you have the shower head things that you could put stuff on. I'd be in the middle of the shower and it'd fall, fly off and hit me in the chest. And I would be like, what is this getting to? Why this? Why in the shower? Why in the bathroom? Why scratch? Why, what's the point of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it makes no sense. I think a lot of that is poltergeist activity, but a lot of times parapsychologists will ignore, the poltergeist, because there's a fine line between a poltergeist just doing something and then something that has a determined will, right, to even communicate. I think that's the biggest difference. Now, getting back to the scratches, here's a phenomenon that I've yet to see raised in the field. There are what are called subdermal skin anomalies that are manifesting not onto the skin, but underneath the skin to the surface. In many cases in hauntology, this will freak you guys out. If you guys haven't heard this, oh my God. This is one of the biggest cases of mine that really shed light into the phenomenon, because I'm like, dude, this doesn't make any sense. I've read the literature. There's something deeper and darker at work. I had an individual I was working with whose his father was a remote viewer, a locally famous remote viewer. He's like, man, let me back up and say this, give you some context. I was doing a lecture about Sinistrari's work and how that a lot of these victims, where they would die from their assaults, and during the autopsies, physicians would peel back their eyelids, and the entities that had assaulted them in the nighttime had carved symbols underneath their eyelids. Won't see that at Paracons, will you?
Wow.
No. Yeah. So, and I don't go to nothing against it, but I'm saying again, if we're ever gonna pierce the veil, we got to think deeper and allow ourselves to go in this really dark areas intellectually, because if not, they're just gonna keep laughing at us. Anyway, so this individual heard that lecture. He emailed me. We got on the phone one day, and he goes, you're talking about scars and symbols. He said, my dad was a famous remote viewer in our hometown, and he said, man, my dad would get messages from his guides, and he would leave his body to meet with them, and they would give him insights, words, prophecies. He would dial up famous basketball players locally. Hey man, I got something for you. Maybe don't sign that contract. Tell your agent you got more money coming. All that kind of stuff. So my dad was known for walking downstairs and stopping dinner, turn all the lights off. Someone's here and wants to talk to us. That kind of stuff. And I got a dog, so she's really excited. So forgive me, man.
Yeah,
she's a Shar-Pei. She's a handful. Anyways, so he said one night my dad went into one of his sessions, and he said, next thing I know, he said, my father starts stumbling down the stairs. He's white as a ghost. He can't talk. He can't breathe. He has a massive heart attack. And he said, we rush to the hospital. When we're in the hospital room, we're taking off his shirt, putting on his robe. As we're doing this, he said he starts burning from inside his skin, and subdermally, the manifestations of religious amulets begin to move from underneath the skin to the surface. Now, right. Now, this is absolutely terrifying, and I'm not being alarmist here. I'm just being truthful.
Mm-hmm.
Here's why it scares me, because they were interreligious. There was the Star of David, the cross of Christianity, and an arching Egyptian hieroglyphic. So demonology is not footing the bill here, because, right, we're all separated, different religious traditions, but that's not the rules they're playing by. And so again, the religious amulets from underneath the skin to the surface, subdermal. Now, subdermal first, and it moved itself up to the surface of the skin. And then when I started lecturing on that and telling stories like that, talking about that specific case study, I had a woman reach out to me, sent me photographs of her and her daughter's arms. They were suffering a malevolent haunting. And she said, Nathaniel, I'm sending you pictures right now. So we were on Facebook, I think it was. She sends me pictures and stuff of her arms and her leg and stuff. And I said, okay, what am I seeing here? She goes, well, I know it just looks like scratches. She said, but we live in a really haunted house. And this entity first attacked my little daughter. She's like maybe 12 years old. And she said, my daughter began to cry. Oh my God, it burns. Just like, remember, it burns. It burns. She said, and it burned from the inside out.
Wow.
So let's go deeper, shall we? Let's go deeper.
Yes.
Now, this phenomenon is cross-cultural, it's interreligious, and there is an aspect of soul first, skin second. I'm getting excited. I love this stuff. It's fascinating. Soul first, skin second. Now, Dr. Ian Stevenson noticed this as afterlife phenomenon because he was dealing with individuals that claimed to have had past lives. And what they were saying, this is going to blow your mind. What they were saying was, I was shot in the neck. In my old body, that was my death wound. But in this body, that's my birthmark. And so what he was suggesting, right, is that there's a relationship between what happens to the soul and what they're doing to the soul and how, I got chills, man, and how it's manifesting through the skin to the surface. Let's move even deeper.
Yes.
Betty and Bob Luca were being abducted out of their body to the point where Bob is falling asleep at nighttime, hears a movement in the bed, wakes up, and they're peeling her apparition out of her body.
Whoa.
Right.
That's insanity.
We've got problems. We've got serious issues here. And to the point where she goes through the entire abduction. And then when she gets back into her body, it's the same behavioral pattern. Her skin begins to manifest scoop marks and skin anomalies. Soul first, skin second, which would imply that many cases of hauntology, demonology, when these scratch marks are occurring, they're attacking us from a spiritual dimension and it's showing up physically. That is a game changer, at least in some cases.
Oh yeah. Just so they're not even actually like present. They're actually just they're doing it through another plane.
Right. Dr. Michael Lynch, one of my best friends in the world, I love his work. Dr. Michael Lynch had a case like that where they were doing a seance or something and an orb flew through a man. And when he did, a burning sensation occurred and scratches began to manifest from underneath the skin to the surface. So as an entire field of researchers, we have to think outside the box. Because whatever they're doing, it does seem to be high magic or high sorcery. I mean, when you're carving amulets through the skin to the surface, that's something Crowley would do, or John Dee, or Edward Kelly, or something is going on that's deeper and darker than take a couple of vials of holy water and call me tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The question I have then is, if you have these demonic forces or alien forces or whatever you want to call them, it's a conglomeration of ancient and modern ideas about possession or abduction.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle and I have gone on ghost hunts,
mm-hmm.
just go speak to entities or spirits at cemeteries, at historical locations. I didn't experience a lot of feeling of anything, but Kyle, I'm not going to speak for Kyle. The psychic who was on those hunts described me as a closed circuit. She was being very charitable by saying that. But the issue is, though, we have these consciousnesses that are interacting with folks like Kyle and I, less with me, more with Kyle, who don't seem to be angry or malevolent or malicious in any way. Is it the same kind of thing, but just on a different end of that spectrum, the good evil spectrum? are we dealing with human consciousness when you're talking about these abductions and these possessions, or are they something else? Are they something?
I think they're both. They're both. Uh, I think that that's the next area of research that has to be entered. I mean, if we're looking at something that's formerly human, it is something. It was someone, right? And there's certain inherited belief system and tendencies that it carries on into the afterlife. But again, when we're looking at a mutated monster of consciousness, a mutation, we're dealing with it. It's going to be something else. Where it is formerly human, it does have aspects and things that you would make it human, but that doesn't mean there isn't something completely alien to it as well. Matter of fact, have experiencers who, during their abduction, these beings have told them, we're formerly human. Now, this gets back into the disembodiment, disincarnate aspect of the phenomenon. When you're dealing with the disembodied ghost, then we're going to have to start really looking into what possession is to them, not to us, right? What does it mean to them?
Right.
And so in my research, I've discovered that possession to us is pregnancy to them. After all, what is possession? What's the phenomenon itself? It's when an entity possesses, it commandeers the consciousness of a host, right? And it begins operating it like a biological avatar. And so that individual, literally, it's like a parasitic entity. It is inside of that body. And in demonological literature, we would call that a social skin. And so this is going to blow your mind too, especially if you're not familiar with my work. It's troubling, but possession is pregnancy to them. This is why I think the Dibuk phenomenon, or the Dybbuk, needs to be explored more, because their possession cases in the 16th century were quite different than what.
Oh, sorry.
Witch doctor, it's all good. Oh my goodness, no. So what was happening to them? What's happening to these women again is they were going to bed at nighttime, and they would be accosted by an entity in their dream, right? And we have this in ancient texts, and one of them is an exorcistic rite. You know, if the female, if she sees a man enter her dreams and try to assault her, this is what you do. Anyways, these women were being assaulted in their nightmares, in their dreams. And so usually the entity would present itself as a former lover or their husband, someone they had been with intimately, and then it would begin to assault them. And so the woman wakes up the next day thinking, oh my God, that was the worst dream ever. I never want to have that again. Thankfully, it was just a dream. And then when they're getting into their, when they're going to work, they are looking in the mirror or something, and they see bruises and ligature marks on their physical body. Then they realize that there was not a dream at all. They were put into a dream state, but what was actually happening to them is they were being assaulted. And so then the entity that assaulted them would begin to possess them. See the pathology and how it evolves. And following the possession, they would become pregnant. And so they were presenting themselves to the exorcists, and they would be showing, they would be literally, the entity had crawled up in the fetal position in their wombs. So much so that these demonologists, they believed that the woman was not only possessed by the entity, but she was pregnant with it. Hello, missing fetus syndrome, to the point that they were performing what's called the lavouche technique. So they would hold their thumb on the wrists of these women. They would feel 2 pulses in one body. It's pregnancy. 2 heartbeats in one body. That's pregnancy. Here's the problem. When they cast the consciousness of that entity out, the phenomenon took the fetus at the same time. Wow. Now that implies something. Oh God. What that implies to me, at least, is that they had placed that consciousness in that fetus. And when the consciousness left, so did the fetus. They're together. They're together. And so this seems to be a self-replication program where these beings will hatch fetuses, place their consciousness in it, and use that as what? Possession. Possession. It's my body now. Now, my research, it's called the red rite in sorcery, the red rite. It was performed by ancient magi, sorcerers. And what they would do is when they knew they were dying, you're going to see the phenomenon right now. It's going to be right there. When they were dying, they would go and inseminate a woman, create a fetus, and take their consciousness and place it in that fetus. And when that fetus grows up, he has a new body.
So they come to term, and it's like a normal, like it's
he
is it
grows
accelerated?
No, the intelligence is, but the fetus grows just like it usually does. And so what we see that now is the missing fetus syndrome, and I can go on, but it's a self-replication program. Possession to us is pregnancy to them. And a lot of these transient possessions, where we see it in Catholicism, it's almost like these beings are literally relearning how to work a body. And then, bam, it's really weird. I don't want to get into that study, but anyways.
So with that, I wonder if there's a connection to like that happening, and then more serial killers and more of
oh my god
stuff like that. Like these, maybe this is part of the possession, and this is they're being able to act out, or this is what they wanted to do. And I mean, there's no way to research it or anything, I'm sure, but
right.
Would you think there was something commonality with it, or?
Yes, to a certain degree. Again, when we're dealing with serial killers, my specific research has been focused on, okay, do they have any preternatural knowledge? Do they know things they shouldn't know, right? It's a test of possession, do they know things about their victims they would have, and we have these super predators, we do, where they can kill with impunity and they enjoy doing it. One of the case studies that I'm fascinated by was Jeffrey Dahmer. His favorite movie was The Exorcist. He would actually make his victims watch The Exorcist prior to killing them. His last and only remaining victim, the only living victim, he tried to drug him. I think it was with liquor, and he didn't drink liquor. He just drank beer, so he never drank the vodka, whatever. Anyways, the victim goes to the restroom. He comes back out, and Jeffrey Dahmer is on his couch watching The Exorcist, and he's speaking in an unknown language. And that's when he was like, deuces, I'm out of here, right? but even then, what separates me, because me and my good friend Amanda Pisano, we talk about this all the time. What's their pathology? When you're dealing with a real serial killer who's not mentally ill and has a ritualistic nature, you're going to be dealing with people like the BTK. And I did a show years ago with the guy who was in contact with Dennis Rader. And Dennis Rader was signing his letters on the bottom with Rex. He would draw a rabbit, Rex. Finally, this researcher asked him, why are you, your name's Dennis. Why are you signing your letters to me as Rex? He said, because I have killed all of my victims for a demon. And that demon's name is Rex. There's no reason for him to lie. He's been in prison for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's something there to it. I mean, absolutely.
Gotcha. Sam looks like he really got a question he really wants to ask.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing is, mechanically speaking, when someone calls you up and says, "Hey, I've got something here," what's the process? How do you go about addressing their concerns?
Back when I used to do cleansings, it would depend. There are times when I don't want to know anything. I would just go in there blind, and I'll feel it, especially if it's a spirit. Right? I'll just go in there blind. Okay, this is what I feel. This is this is what I think it is. Deal with it. I pray. When I used to do cleansing, I would pray, and sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Honestly, but that would be the first steps to actually entering the home, talking with the family, sitting down, asking. Sometimes, again, like I said, I'll ask questions. Sometimes I don't. Depends on how I feel. My questions would consist of, okay, what have you seen? What have you felt? Have you been in the occult? Is there suicidal ideations? Do you have a history of suicide in your family? Because these beings have literally mapped out bloodlines. I had a case where the grandfather committed suicide, and then the granddaughter, because he committed suicide, that same entity was wanting her to commit suicide. And so when she came to me one day at a restaurant, just, hey, there's an attachment suicide on you. It's familial, not just familiar spirits, but familial spirits. Who in your history and your bloodline has committed suicide. And these beings, a lot of them will act literally like, okay, I took your grandfather, I could take you too, right? I have permission now. And I think that's when you get into spiritual warfare and breaking things off of people, where you have to give them their agency back, but you cannot do that without their permission. So I hope I answered that question.
So is that all there is to it? You show up, you talk about their family history. You say some prayers. You talk to the family. Is it just about helping them understand or build up their own defenses? Do you have any
yes
any actions
yes
you take on your own to try and exercise?
Well, I mean, the last cleansing I did was a murder case, and I just prayed that God would send an angel. And when it happened, it was nuts. There was an atheist that was there, and when I first entered the home, he met me face to face, squared up with me. Hey, Nate, first of all, if you don't, you guys can call me Nate, but this guy, I'm Nathaniel, you know what I mean? He didn't know me from Adam. Hey, Nate, all this stuff. I don't believe in spirits. I don't believe in you. I don't believe in any of this. I'm just here for my friend. Well, when I was done with the cleansing, he was in the fetal position falling. Something had changed. But again, that doesn't happen all the time. I could say the same words, the same way. I could wear the same outfit, same clone, whatever, and do the same thing, but it won't work. So again, it's just strange.
Then, okay, so after all of the things that you've done, are there any success stories that you feel really excited about, or is it all pretty much dark and scary, and we've all just got to buckle up and get ready for battle?
The murder case that I had was, and people say I sound like a detective. No, obviously, but they did call me out there, and they had just cut up the carpet. That's how fresh it was. It was weird, man. I had no idea. I had no frame of reference. I just thought it was going to go pray for people or look at it, whatever. And anyways, when I did the cleansing, what happened was the mother was killed by a friend of the daughter. And so both minors went to jail. Well, after I did the cleansing, about 2 or 3 months later, I'm sitting at the same restaurant I was the night I got the email from the family, same chair, reading the same book, when a couple sits down next to me on the left side. At first, it was the husband and then the wife, but the wife kept peeking over at my book I was reading. This is why I tell people I'm a plumber. And she switches, because I don't want to tell people I'm a demonologist, it's kind of weird. Anyways, she starts asking me questions, and what was her last case? And I didn't go really into it. I just see it was a murder case here, whatever, blah, 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 blah. She goes, "You're Nathaniel Gillis." I said, "Okay, how do you know that?" "I don't want to tell you." So 45 minutes later, I finally get it out of her. She's a social worker that's been working with both minors that are in jail. She said the night I did the cleansing, the entity that had been manifesting to the oldest 15-year-old that committed the murder, the 15-year-old called her from the jail cell and said that the entity came by and said he'll no longer be able to visit me, and he left. Now, just because that cleansing worked does not mean I know why it worked. Right? This gets back into Catholicism. They base their ritual on the rate of success and not on the reason for the success. It can work, doesn't mean we know why. And so that's why in my own work, I'm trying to understand it more and more. But yeah, that was a success story.
So we got a question in chat, but before we get to that, I got one quick question and a follow-up question with it. So when you go in and you don't ask, so I take it you're sensitive and you can feel that, and you kind of got an instant feeling about it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. As a matter of fact, the night that I got the email, Some people believe this, whatever. Some people won't, but it happens. But as I was sitting in that chair, consciously, I was walking up the steps to a second-story house, and I located the entity in the closet. When I told that the sister of the victim that, because oh my God, I was in that closet last night. So when I got to the house, I pressed record, and we went through the house. And at this particular time, I didn't want to know anything. I was just going off of what I felt. And we had located the entity in the closet upstairs, and there was a box, a green milk carton full of model trains. I said the entity is attracted to these trains. I don't know why. Either it reminds the entity of his past life or something. I didn't know why. There's something attached to him. And so then me and the sister, we turn around and we go into another closet in the same room. There's a bunch of fishing equipment. Then I go downstairs and I'm talking to the sister. And I said, okay. I said, the victim was obviously deceased, but I saw her sitting at the dinner table. There was no chair. The only thing I could see was just the table, right? The victim wasn't there, the chair wasn't there. But I saw her sitting there. And I go and talk to the husband about it. Next thing you know, it was his father-in-law, the victim's father, who had died, left all of his gear upstairs. And he told her, again, you guys can edit this out because it's controversial. It doesn't make sense, and it shouldn't make sense. But he told her he was into drugs. He was a gangbanger, motorcycle gang guy. He told her, "I'll kill you." And so in the cleansing, I was able to. I can't explain it, but he left. The entity left, and when he left, you could see it was almost like somebody turned the lights on slowly, and the darkness just. It's so much so that the sister that was with me, they were all crying. And at that point, it looked like someone had just turned the lights on. And the sister actually thought that's what happened. She actually went upstairs to the house thinking, oh my God, somebody just went and turned all the lights on. But here's something fascinating. It could not open its own door. So it used the 13-year-old to open the door inside the house. But the 13-year-old did not have the nature to murder. The 15-year-old did. So it had possessed both of them. I say that loosely, right? Influenced both of them to accomplish its own goal. Very, very sinister, insidious forces here.
Yes. Okay, I have another question, but let's get our viewer question out of the way. Then.
What's up, Evan? That's my buddy.
That's why you came to this.
Yeah. You know what, Evan? Check this out, man. I'm going to get that book. I looked it up yesterday. And so great suggestion. Evan's always got book suggestions, and I'm always like trying to catch up with it. Like I need to get that book, but I'm going to buy that and I'll read it, and then we're going to talk about it. Evan.
Okay, cool. So now my next question is, with the way society has changed, and you can see the anger of people, the hostility of people, the tension of the way people are now,
mm-hmm.
Do you see an increase in this kind of activity with people of possessions and influencing, and because of the nature of the way kind of the world is now?
Yes, and I think that a lot of it has to do with addiction. You know what I mean? There's a guy that you guys may want to have on your show. His name's Dr. Jerry Marzinski. And he worked with a lot of addicts. And he worked in mental asylums and ERs and stuff. And he talks about cases where these entities will literally get a person addicted to drugs to the point that when they're trying to get clean, it'll tell them to get in the car and to drive. Where am I going? I'll tell you when you get there. Unbelievable. And then the person, okay, I'm in the red light district or something, and okay, you see that White House down there on the right? Yeah, go knock on that door. Bam, he's a meth addict or a meth dealer. He had no idea, right? So I am seeing that, especially in my own field, where people, it's either that or the occult, right? And a lot of times they'll intersect. And I think again, it's the phenomenon manipulating our human condition. We want to transcend. We want to be wanted. We want to feel loved. And if we can't, right, we're looking for an outlet of escape.
It's understandable.
Mm-hmm.
I could see that.
one of kind of the things that I have seen a lot, and I think this goes back to this idea of these entities being deceptive, is that people's, to go to Kyle's point, people's anger and frustration tends to mount when reality doesn't match their expectations.
Right.
And a lot of that expectation gets set from deceptive actors, right? You have
Oh my God, yes.
you have people in the news or in politics who are setting expectations that are false, and they know that they're false when they say them. And then when there's when reality hits and we all readjust and we realize that the expectations that were set for us were false to begin with, there's that anger and frustration that comes out. And in a very kind of supernatural, maybe existential way, this deceptive, I feel like there's been place created or space held for very deceptive entities based on the willingness of the people who are living and kind of taking up airways to also be deceptive. Like you said, the spiritual create, spiritual first, then physical later. But it can also kind of create this biofeedback loop, right, of deception, where there's a willingness to deceive and accept deception in order to perpetuate the kind of the spiritual decay and anger and frustration that again leads to more deception and anger and hate, and it's kind of that Jedi, the Jedi warning.
The snake eating its own tail. I had a lady reach out to me years ago, and insidious, again, the deception is real and it's existential. It really is existential. This lady's mother was a cancer patient, and she was in the hospital. And she said that, I'm talking to the daughter now, and so the daughter was telling me that one night they were in the hospital together. It's at nighttime, lights off, and the bathroom door was creaked open, the lights off in the bathroom. He is on the verge of, she's got late stages of cancer. She's going through chemo, just really suffering, really suffering. And as they're asleep, from the bathroom came a male voice, called the mother by name. Here's the deception. Why don't you just give up and die? It's your time. It's your time. So,
nah.
I'd be willing. I'm getting that out of here. You know what I mean? No, but again, this existential crisis of actually something being on the other side waiting for us, wanting us to die. I've told people this before. I've had two different experiencers email me in 2 hours within each other. From each other. Both of them told me that my guides told me to tell you, Nathaniel, that they'll be waiting for you when you die. So whatever we're dealing with, again, it's somewhere in this dimension, but not. It's right beside us. It's right there, but it's not. And physics has yet to understand that. But I think we're getting more insight. But getting back to this what I call the protocols of belief. Because if that individual really believed it was her time, when it wasn't, that entity caused her to believe, right? It beckoned her. And so this gets back to the idea that Dr. Jerry Marzinski and I talked about about 6 months ago, that these are not my thoughts. And that entity will begin, this is how possession begins. It'll start thinking for you. So much so that one day it'll give you a thought and you won't know the difference. You'll think it's your own thought. I did this. Did you really? You know what I mean? And so, anyways, I can keep going, but it's crazy stuff.
Well, I think probably the biggest takeaway for me from this conversation is that things happen spiritually first, or like you said, first the soul, then the skin.
Scary stuff. Yeah.
And that is actually kind of a religious belief of my own, that, creation happens spiritually, mentally, before it happens physically. Maybe it's in the mind, maybe it's in the soul, whatever you want to call it. But that actually, to me, is a hopeful sentiment, because it means that we have a way to create what they seek to destroy. We can seek to create, and
100%.
and that gives us power over our own destinies. And I'm going to take that kind of dark image that you gave of soul first, then skin, and flip it around and say, same thing in the opposite direction. But Nathaniel, thank you so much for joining us. I do want to plug your YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's Nathaniel Gillis, and I'm not on there, dude. I've got like 2,800 almost subscribers. I'm never on there. I need to start getting more videos out there.
Is that right?
That's it, my friend.
And it looks like you are, a month ago, you announced you're self-publishing The Skin That Crawls.
Yeah, it's too dark for a lot of people, and whatever, it's gonna happen. So I got to get it out there. You know what I mean? Yeah. But that's my YouTube channel, and I have my show with Rex Bear on Elite Project every Thursday night. Well, it was I'm doing it now because I'm just getting busy. I'm doing it every first and last Thursday of the month at 9 p.m. And you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. A lot of my research I post on Instagram, just because it's the people that follow me on there are more geared towards it.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you.
For all of our audience who tuned in today and who may pick up this episode later, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. We love your comments, and thank you to Evan for your question and comments, and for everybody else who tuned in live.
I think everybody was scared to ask questions today.
Yeah, it was kind of chilling. I had somebody who was feeding me questions on Messenger, and I was like, just type it in the chat.
Oh my God. You know what's happened before? I mean, we can end the show. We could talk about this afterwards, but I've got some stories for you guys. It's hilarious.
Well, very good.
Awesome.
And until next time, keep on exploring the edges of the unknown.